how did Katie Holmes leave Tom Cruise and Scientology?
The actual part where she literally leaves seems to have been the easy part. I'm sure it took months and months and months of planning.
What if the woman the world watched fall in love on a global stage had been quietly planning her escape for years? Katie Holmes built her name as a fresh-faced actress from Ohio, became one of the most talked-about celebrities on Earth the moment she stepped out with Tom Cruise, and then vanished into a silence so complete that millions of people spent over a decade wondering what had really happened behind closed doors. Now, at 47, the picture is finally becoming clearer, and what it reveals changes everything most people thought they knew. From Dawson's Creek to Tom Cruise's world. Before the world knew Katie Holmes as the woman who outwitted Hollywood's most powerful couple, she was simply a girl from Toledo, Ohio, with a gift for performing and a 4.0 grade point average. Born Kate Noel Holmes on December 18, 1978, she was the youngest of 5 children raised by a homemaker mother and a father who worked as an attorney and had played basketball at Marquette University. She was baptized Catholic, attended an all-female Catholic school, and scored 1,310 out of 1,600 on her SAT. Her father wanted her to become a doctor. What the family got instead was one of television's most beloved stars. Holmes shot her audition tape for Dawson's Creek from her own basement while still in high school, with her mother reading the other lines, and she won the part of Joey Potter. The show ran from 1998 to 2003, and Holmes became a household name across the country, particularly among young audiences who grew up alongside her character. By the early 2000s, she was appearing in major film productions and had built a career entirely on her own terms, completely separate from the entertainment industry machine that would later attempt to reshape her identity. Her personal life in those years was equally grounded. She dated her Dawson's Creek co-star Joshua Jackson, whom she later described as her first love. She then became engaged to actor Chris Klein in late 2003, a relationship that ended in early 2005. And then, in April 2005, everything changed in a way that no one around her had fully anticipated. Tom Cruise stepped into her life, and almost immediately, every aspect of how the public perceived Katie Holmes shifted. What the public saw was a whirlwind romance, Cruise famously jumping on Oprah Winfrey's couch in May 2005 to announce his love for Holmes, a televised moment of spectacle that set the tone for everything that followed. What fewer people knew at the time was the context in which that relationship reportedly began. According to reporting by Vanity Fair, the Church of Scientology had previously run a covert process of identifying and vetting potential romantic partners for Cruise after his relationships with Nicole Kidman and Penelope Cruz had ended. Holmes, according to multiple published accounts, was presented as the ideal match. She was Catholic before the relationship started, and Holmes did not become a Scientologist until she started dating Cruise, a detail that matters when understanding the complete arc of what came next. The couple became engaged just 7 weeks after meeting, a pace that surprised even people close to both of them. Their daughter Suri was born on April 18, 2006, the exact first anniversary of the day they had gone public as a couple. That November, they married in a Scientology ceremony at the 15th century Odescalchi Castle in Bracciano, Italy, with a prior civil ceremony completed in Los Angeles the day before. From the outside, the marriage looked like the ultimate Hollywood fairy tale. From the inside, something was already beginning to fracture. The story of how that marriage came undone is not just a celebrity divorce story. It is a story of surveillance, legal strategy, quiet courage, and a woman who refused to become the next cautionary tale. And it started long before anyone outside her inner circle knew what was coming. The silent years and the controlled environment. Once Holmes entered the world of Tom Cruise, the environment around her changed in ways that people close to the situation described as suffocating. According to Ron Miscavige, the late estranged father of Scientology leader David Miscavige, Sea Org staff from the Church of Scientology lived in the couple's home, ostensibly to assist them, but also to maintain an ever-present watchful eye over the household. Ron Miscavige told the Daily Mail in 2016 that the arrangement did not sit well with Holmes and that it hurt the marriage, creating what he described as an oppressive and controlling environment for the young actress. This kind of surveillance reportedly made Holmes increasingly uneasy as the years passed. She had grown up with a father who was an attorney and a family that valued privacy and independence. Being monitored inside her own home by people aligned with an institution she had not grown up in, and whose internal practices she had not chosen for herself, was the opposite of the life she had known before Cruise. The example of Nicole Kidman loomed large over the marriage. Kidman, Cruise's second wife, had lost meaningful contact with the two children she and Cruise had adopted together, Connor and Isabella, after their 2001 divorce. Former senior Scientology member Marty Rathbun alleged that Scientology ran an aggressive campaign to pull Cruise away from Kidman and that the couple's children were later re-educated by the church, which only caused a greater rift between them and their mother. For Holmes, watching from a distance as Kidman navigated those consequences, the situation made the stakes of her own position unmistakably clear. Holmes spent the years of her marriage largely silent on any subject touching Scientology or her private life. She appeared at events, she raised Suri, and she returned to acting in productions like the Broadway show All My Sons in 2008. But the Katie Holmes, who had once laughed openly on the covers of magazines and spoken freely about her dreams in interviews, had become a carefully managed public figure, tightly scripted and conspicuously quiet on anything of substance. Cruise's team, in those years, was embedded in her daily life. According to reporting by TMZ, Holmes had been given a bodyguard and a driver by Cruise who had worked for him for years, meaning that the people surrounding her on a daily basis were ultimately more loyal to him than to her. Every move she made was observed, and every conversation she had could potentially be reported back. This was not the life of a free woman. It was the life of someone who understood that any misstep could cost her everything she cared about, most especially her daughter. Understanding why Holmes stayed silent for so long requires understanding what she was quietly building while keeping that silence. What happened next was not an impulsive reaction. It was a plan, years in the making. The escape that shocked Hollywood. By 2012, Holmes had made up her mind. But walking away from a marriage to one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, surrounded by a religious organization with significant resources and a well-documented track record of protecting its own interests, required preparation that most people never see in a divorce. Holmes moved methodically. She fired her bodyguard and her driver, the two people most closely connected to Cruise, and assembled a team of people she had chosen herself, individuals she was certain had no allegiance to her husband. She rented a secret apartment in New York City to ensure she and Suri had somewhere safe to go immediately after the divorce filing. She prepared 3 separate law firms in 3 different states, anticipating that Cruise might attempt to shift the legal battle to California, where joint custody arrangements were more common and where Scientology had a stronger institutional presence. Her father, Martin Holmes, who was himself an attorney, was central to the legal preparation and had reportedly been instrumental in structuring the ironclad prenuptial agreement years earlier. When she was ready, Holmes placed a call to Cruise from a disposable phone obtained through a trusted friend, a device chosen specifically so that Cruise's team could not trace or intercept the communication before she was safely positioned. Cruise was filming a movie in Iceland at the time. The divorce announcement blindsided him completely, with sources telling people that he was left in genuine shock after receiving the call. Holmes filed for divorce in New York on June 29, 2012, citing irreconcilable differences. The strategic choice of New York over California was significant. New York's family courts were less favorable to Cruise's preferred outcome of joint custody. The settlement was reached in just 11 days, making it one of the fastest divorce resolutions in Hollywood history. Holmes was granted full custody of Suri. Cruise received visitation rights. The financial terms became partially public through later legal proceedings. Cruise was required to pay $400,000 per year in child support until Suri turned 18, covering her medical expenses, education, insurance, and extracurricular activities, a total that amounted to approximately $4.8 million over 12 years. Holmes also received a reported $5 million for herself as part of the settlement. Then came the clause that would define the next decade of Holmes's public life. Reports emerged, including from Radar Online in 2016, that the settlement contained a non-disclosure agreement under which Holmes agreed not to speak publicly about Cruise or Scientology and not to date publicly until 2017, in exchange for the financial provisions of the agreement. Holmes honored that agreement with a consistency that struck observers as almost supernatural, given the pressure she must have faced to speak out. She said almost nothing about the marriage, almost nothing about Scientology, and deflected questions about her ex-husband with a discipline that suggested she understood exactly what was at stake. Following her divorce, Holmes returned to the Catholic Church and began attending St. Francis Xavier Church in New York City. The woman who had traded her faith for a religion she had not chosen was quietly reclaiming the spiritual life she had grown up in. The question of whether Holmes would ever actually break that silence became one of the more quietly anticipated storylines in celebrity culture. And the answer began to reveal itself not through a dramatic interview, but through the accumulation of small, deliberate choices over many years. Suri, silence, and the years of rebuilding. The central focus of Holmes's post-divorce life was Suri. Every decision she made in the years following 2012, from where she lived to what projects she accepted, was filtered through the question of what was best for her daughter. She stayed in New York, maintaining the stability of a consistent home in one city rather than chasing film sets around the country. She rebuilt her social circle from scratch, relying on a small group of trusted friends and family rather than the industry connections that had surrounded her during the Cruise years. Tom Cruise's relationship with Suri became increasingly distant in the years following the divorce. Sources close to the situation have said that Suri no longer has a relationship with her father and has not spent meaningful time with him in over a decade. The widely understood explanation for this estrangement is rooted in Scientology's doctrine regarding people who leave the church, whom the organization formally classifies as suppressive persons. Members who remain in the church are typically encouraged to disconnect from those who have left. Since Suri departed the faith along with her mother after the divorce, this framework put her and Cruise on opposite sides of a boundary the church actively reinforces. Cruise acknowledged in a 2013 legal deposition that Suri was no longer practicing Scientology, though he insisted there was no need to protect his daughter from his religion. Holmes, for her part, said almost nothing about any of this publicly. She gave interviews that were warm and thoughtful, but strategically contained, discussing her career, her love of New York, and her relationship with Suri in general terms that revealed everything about her priorities and nothing about the years she had spent inside a controlled environment. In one of her more revealing statements, Holmes told people a few years after the divorce that she no longer had fear, no longer imposed many rules on herself, and did not take herself too seriously. A description that, when read against the backdrop of what preceded it, sounds less like a casual observation and more like a woman describing what freedom actually felt like after years of not having it. In another interview, she described a moment in which Suri, then 6 or 7 years old, had called her from a sleepover to be picked up. Holmes had taken a cab to Battery Park at 10 in the evening, and on the ride back their building, the cab driver had helped carry the sleeping Suri inside without waking her. Holmes said she had actually cried at the kindness of that stranger. It is a story about a small moment of grace, but the weight it carried spoke to what those years of single motherhood in New York had been. Quiet, unglamorous, and more meaningful to her than anything from the previous chapter of her life. Suri graduated in 2024 from LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts in New York, the same school that produced alumni, including Timothée Chalamet and Nicki Minaj. She enrolled at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh that fall, and, in a symbolic act of independence, began using the name Suri Noel, adopting her mother's middle name and quietly dropping the surname Cruz. Holmes responded to her daughter's departure for college with pride that was visible even through the characteristically restrained public statements she made. Holmes told Town and Country that she was proud of Suri, and that while she would miss the close proximity, she was genuinely happy for her daughter and excited about what was beginning for her. With Suri now launched into her own adult life, and with the legal constraints of the divorce settlement having reached their expiration point, the years ahead for Holmes look fundamentally different from any chapter that came before. And what she has already begun to say publicly tells its own story. What Katie Holmes has said, and what it all means at 47. Holmes turned 47 in December 2025, an age that coincides with a professional and personal renaissance that has been building quietly for several years. The non-disclosure agreement's reported expiration, combined with Suri reaching adulthood, has removed most of the formal and practical constraints that kept Holmes's public voice so carefully contained for over a decade. She returned to Broadway in 2024 in a revival of Thornton Wilder's Our Town, playing Mrs. Webb alongside Jim Parsons, Zoe Deutsch, and Richard Thomas. The production was a critical success and signaled that Holmes was not merely filling time between larger opportunities. She was choosing meaningful work on her own terms, the kind of stage-driven, character-focused acting that had nothing to do with the blockbuster franchise priorities that had defined the Cruise era of her career. In 2026, she extended that stage work into an off-Broadway revival of Hedda Gabler at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, playing the title role, a character known in theatrical literature precisely for her entrapment, her intelligence, and her impossible choices. The selection of that particular role, for a woman of Holmes's specific history, is difficult to read as accidental. What Holmes has actually said in recent years about the marriage and its aftermath is measured but telling. She told people that she did not want the divorce to define her or to become what she was known as, insisting that she was an actor before that chapter, during it, and after it. That statement, delivered with the calm of someone who has thought it through carefully, is as close to a public declaration of independence as Holmes has made. She is not building her identity around what happened to her. She is building it around who she was before and who she is choosing to be now. Her romantic life since 2017, when the reported dating restriction expired, has included the chef Emilio Vitolo Jr. in 2020 to 2021 and musician Bobby Wooten 3 for 7 months in 2022. Neither relationship was discussed publicly in any detail by Holmes herself, consistent with the privacy she has maintained about her personal life since the divorce. Reports as of January 2026 suggested she may have rekindled a connection with former Dawson's Creek co-star Joshua Jackson, the man she once described as her first love, though Holmes has confirmed nothing publicly about the nature of that relationship. Her current net worth is estimated at approximately $15 million by Celebrity Net Worth, built through her Dawson's Creek earnings, which rose from $30,000 per episode in the early seasons to $175,000 per episode in later ones, her film and stage work, and endorsement deals with brands including Gap, Coach, and Garnier. She is, financially, entirely her own person. What the full arc of Katie Holmes' story reveals at 47 is the portrait of a woman who survived something most people never have to confront. Not just a difficult marriage, but a system designed to make leaving feel impossible. She watched what happened to Nicole Kidman and made sure it would not happen to her. She used her father's legal expertise, her own intelligence, and a patience that must have cost her enormously to construct an exit that protected the one thing she was unwilling to compromise on, her daughter's freedom. And when the door finally opened, she walked through it quietly, without a tell-all book, without a dramatic press conference, and without the kind of revenge narrative that the tabloid industry was clearly hoping for. The silence itself was never really silence. It was the sound of someone building something real, carefully, on ground she had chosen for herself. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.